Thrift by Samuel Smiles. Healthy Homes, Part 3. Homes are the manufactories of men, and as the homes are, so will the man be. Mind will be degraded by the physical influences around it. Decency will be destroyed by constant contact with impurity and defilement, and coarseness of manners, habits, and tastes will become inevitable. You cannot rear a kindly nature, sensitive against evil, careful of proprieties, and desirous of moral and intellectual improvement amidst the darkness, dampness, disorder, and discomfort which unhappily characterize so large a portion of the dwellings of the poor in our large towns, and until we can, by some means or other, improve their domestic accommodation, their low moral and social condition must be regarded as inevitable. We want not only a better class of dwellings, but we require the people to be so educated as to appreciate them. An Irish landlord took his tenantry out of their mud huts and removed them into comfortable dwellings which he had built for their accommodation. When he returned to his estate, he was greatly disappointed. The houses were as untidy and uncomfortable as before. The pig was still under the bed, and the hens over it. The concrete floor was as dirty as the mud one had been. The panes of the windows were broken, and the garden was full of weeds. The landlord wrote to a friend in despair. The friend replied, "You have begun at the wrong end. You ought to have taught them the value of cleanliness, thriftiness, and comfort." To begin at the beginning, therefore, we must teach the people the necessity of cleanliness, its virtues and its wholesomeness, for which purpose it is requisite that they should be intelligent, capable of understanding ideas conveyed in words, able to discern, able to read, able to think. In short, the people, as children, must first have been to school and properly taught there, whereas we have allowed the majority of the working people to grow up untaught, nearly half of them unable to read and write, and then we expect them to display the virtues, prudence, judgment, and forethought of well-educated beings. It is of the first importance to teach people cleanly habits. This can be done without teaching them either reading or writing. Cleanliness is more than wholesomeness. It furnishes an atmosphere of self-respect and influences the moral condition of the entire household. It is the best exponent of the spirit of thrift. It is to the economy of the household what hygiene is to the human body. It should preside at every detail of domestic service. It indicates comfort and well-being. It is among the distinctive attributes of civilization and marks the progress of nations. Dr. Paley was accustomed to direct the particular attention of travelers in foreign countries to the condition of the people as respects cleanliness and the local provisions for the prevention of pollution. He was of opinion that a greater insight might thus be obtained into their habits of decency, self-respect, and industry, and into their moral and social condition generally, than from facts of any other description. People are cleanly in proportion as they are decent, industrious, and self-respecting. Unclean people are uncivilized. The dirty classes of great towns are invariably the dangerous classes of those towns. And if we would civilize the classes yet uncivilized, we must banish dirt from amongst them. Yet dirt forms no part of our nature. It is a parasite feeding upon human life and destroying it. It is hideous and disgusting. There can be no beauty where it is. The prettiest woman is made repulsive by it. Children are made fretful, impatient, and bad-tempered by it. Men are degraded and made reckless by it. There is little modesty where dirt is, for dirty is indecency. There can be little purity of mind where the person is impure, for the body is the temple of the soul, and must be cleansed and purified to be worthy of the shrine within. Dirt has an affinity with self-indulgence and drunkenness. The sanitary inquirers have clearly made out that the dirty classes are the drunken classes, and that they are prone to seek, in the stupefaction of beer, gin, and opium, a refuge from the miserable depression caused by the foul conditions in which they live. We need scarcely refer to the moral as well as the physical beauty of cleanliness. Cleanliness which indicates self-respect and is the root of many fine virtues, and especially of purity, delicacy, and decency. We might even go farther and say that purity of thought and feeling result from habitual purity of body, for the mind and heart of man are, to a very great extent, influenced by external conditions and circumstances, and habit and custom, as regards outward things, stamp themselves deeply on the whole character, alike upon the moral feelings and the intellectual powers. Moses was the most practical of sanitary reformers. Among the Eastern nations generally, cleanliness is a part of religion. They esteem it not only as next to godliness, but as a part of godliness itself. They connect the idea of internal sanctity with that of external purification. They feel that it would be an insult to the Maker they worship to come into his presence covered with impurity. Hence the Mohammedans devote almost as much care to the erection of baths as to that of mosques, and alongside the place of worship is usually found the place of cleansing, so that the faithful may have the ready means of purification previous to their act of worship. What worship, says a great writer, is there not in mere washing? Perhaps one of the most moral things a man, in common cases, has it in his power to do. Strip thyself, go into the bath, or whir it into the limpid pool of a running brook, and there wash and be clean. Thou wilt step out again a purer and a better man. This consciousness of perfect outer pureness, that to thy skin there now adheres no foreign speck of imperfection, how it radiates on thee with cunning symbolic influences to thy very soul. Thou hast an increased tendency towards all good things whatsoever. The oldest Eastern sages, with joy and holy gratitude, had felt it to be so, and that it was the Maker's gift and will. The common well-being of men, women, and children depends upon attention to what at first sight may appear comparatively trivial matters. And unless these small matters be attended to, comfort in person, mind, and feeling is absolutely impossible. The physical satisfaction of a child, for example, depends upon attention to its feeding, clothing, and washing. These are the commonest of common things, and yet they are of the most essential importance. If the child is not properly fed and clothed, it will grow up feeble and ill-conditioned, and as the child is, so will the man be. Grown people cannot be comfortable without regular attention to these common matters. Everyone needs, and ought to have, comfort at home, and comfort is the united product of cleanliness, thrift, regularity, industry, in short, a continuous performance of duties, each in itself apparently trivial. The cooking of a potato, the baking of a loaf, the mending of a shirt, the darning of a pair of stockings, the making of a bed, the scrubbing of a floor, the washing and dressing of a baby are all matters of no great moment. But a woman ought to know how to do these before the management of a household, however poor, is entrusted to her. Why, asked Lord Ashburton in a lecture to the students of the Wolfsey training schools, why was one mother of a family a better economist than another? Why could one live in abundance where another starved? Why, in similar dwellings, were the children of one parent healthy, of another puny and ailing? Why could this labourer do with ease a task that would kill his fellow? It was not luck nor chance that decided those differences. It was the patient observation of nature that suggested to some gifted minds rules for their guidance which had escaped the heedlessness of others. It is not so much, however, the patient observation of nature as good training in the home and in the school that enables some women to accomplish so much more than others in the development of human beings and the promotion of human comfort. And to do this efficiently, women as well as men require to be instructed as to the nature of the objects upon which they work. Take one branch of science as an illustration, the physiological. In this science, we hold that every woman should receive some instruction. And why? Because if the laws of physiology were understood by women, children would grow up into better, healthier, happier, and probably wiser men and women. Children are subject to certain physiological laws, the observance of which is necessary for their health and comfort. Is it not reasonable, therefore, to expect that women should know something of those laws and of their operation? If they are ignorant of them, they will be liable to commit all sorts of blunders, productive of suffering, disease, and death. To what are we to attribute the frightful mortality of children in most of our large towns, where 1/2 of all that are born perish before they reach their 5th year? If women, as well as men, knew something of the laws of healthy living, about the nature of the atmosphere, how its free action upon the blood is necessary to health, of the laws of ventilation, cleanliness, and nutrition, we cannot but think that the moral, not less than the physical condition of the human beings committed to their charge would be greatly improved and promoted. Were anything like a proper attention given to common things, there would not be such an amount of discomfort, disease, and mortality amongst the young. But we accustom people to act as if there were no such provisions as natural laws. If we violate them, we do not escape the consequences because we have been ignorant of their mode of operation. We have been provided with intelligence that we might know them. And if society keep its members blind and ignorant, the evil consequences are inevitably reaped. Thus tens of thousands perish for lack of knowledge of even the smallest and yet most necessary conditions of right living. Women have also need to be taught the important art of domestic economy. If they do not earn the family income, at least they have to spend the money earned. And their instruction ought to have a view to the spending of that money wisely. For this purpose, a knowledge of arithmetic is absolutely necessary. Some may say, what use can a woman have for arithmetic? But when men marry, They soon find this out. If the woman who has a household to manage be innocent of addition and multiplication, and if she fail to keep a record of her income or expenditure, she will, before long, find herself in great trouble. She will find that she cannot make the ends meet and then run into debt. If she spend too much on dress, she will have too little for food or education. She will commit extravagances in one direction or another, and thus subject her household to great discomfort. She may also bring her husband into trouble through the debts she has contracted, and make a beginning of his misfortunes and sometimes of his ruin. Much might be said in favor of household management, and especially in favor of improved cookery. Ill-cooked meals is a source of discomfort in many families. Bad cooking is waste of money and loss of comfort. Whom God has joined in matrimony, ill-cooked joints and ill-boiled potatoes have very often put asunder. Among the common things which educators should teach the rising generation, this ought certainly not to be overlooked. It is the commonest and yet most neglected of the branches of female education. The greater part of human labor is occupied in the direct production of the materials for human food. The farming classes and the laborers devote themselves to the planting, rearing, and reaping of oats and other cereals, and the grazing farmer to the production of cattle and sheep for the maintenance of the population at large. All these articles, corn, beef, mutton, and such like, are handed over to the female half of the human species to be converted into food, for the sustenance of themselves, their husbands, and their families. How do they use their power? Can they cook? Have they been taught to cook? Is it not a fact that, in this country, cooking is one of the lost or undiscovered arts? Thousands of artisans and laborers are deprived of half the actual nutriment of their food, and continue half-starved because their wives are utterly ignorant of the art of cooking. They are yet in entire darkness as to the economizing of food and the means of rendering it palatable and digestible. Even the middle classes are badly served in this respect. If we could see, says a public writer, by the help of an Asmodeus, what is going on at the dinner hour of the humbler of the middle class, what a spectacle of discomfort, waste, ill-temper, and consequent ill-conduct it would be. The man quarrels with his wife because there's nothing he can eat, and he generally makes up in drink for the deficiencies in the article of food. There is thus not only the direct waste of food and detriment to health, but the further consequent waste of the use of spirits with its injury to the habits and the health. On the other hand, people who eat well drink moderately, the satisfaction of the appetite dispensing with the necessity for resorting to stimulants. Good humour too, and good health follow a good meal, and by a good meal we mean anything, however simple, well dressed in its way. A rich man may live very expensively and very ill, and a poor man may live frugally and very well, if it be his good fortune to have a good cook in his wife or in his servant. The most worthless unit in a family is an ill-managing wife, or an indolent woman of any sort. The fair sex are sometimes very acute in what concerns themselves. They keep a tight hand over their dressmakers and milliners. They can tell to a thread when a flounce is too narrow or a tuck too deep. But if their knowledge only extends to their own dress, They are not helpmeets, but encumbrances. If they know nothing of their kitchen and are at the mercy of the cook, their table will soon be intolerable. Bad soup, soft and flabby fish, meat burnt outside and raw within. The husband will soon fly from the Barmecide feast and take refuge in his club, where he will not only find food that he can digest, but at the same time fly from the domestic discord that usually accompanies ill-cooked victuals at home. Mr. Smee says that diseases of the digestive organs greatly exceed in England the relative number found in other countries. The reason is that in no other country do men eat so much ill-cooked food. The least observant of travellers must have been struck with admiration at the readiness with which a dinner of 8 or 10 dishes of various eatables makes its appearance in foreign inns, particularly when he remembers the perpetual mutton chop and mashed potatoes of the English road. The author remembers arriving at a roadside inn in a remote part of Dauphiny, immediately under the foot of the Pic du Midi. On looking at the clay floor and the worn state of the furniture, he remarked to his friend, "Surely we can get no dinner here?" "Wait till you see," was his answer. In about half an hour the table, though propped up, was spread with a clean tablecloth, and successive dishes of soup, fowl, roast beef, pommes de terre frites, French beans, with wholesome bread and butter made their appearance. In the principal inns of most provincial towns in England it would not have been possible to obtain such a dinner. Great would be the gain to the community if cookery were made an ordinary branch of female education. To the poor the gain would be incalculable. Among the prizes which the bountifuls of both sexes are fond of bestowing in the country, we should like to see some offered for the best boiled potato, the best grilled mutton chop, and the best seasoned hodgepodge, soup or broth. In writing of a well-boiled potato, we are aware that we shall incur the contempt of many for attaching importance to a thing they suppose to be so common. But the fact is that their contempt arises, as is often the origin of contempt, from their ignorance, there being not one person in 100 who has ever seen and tasted that great rarity, a well-boiled potato. In short, we want common sense in cookery, as in most other things. Food should be used, and not abused. Much of it is now absolutely wasted for want of a little art in cooking it. Food is not only wasted by bad cooking, but much of it is thrown away which French women would convert into something savoury and digestible. Health, morals, and family enjoyments are all connected with the question of cookery. Above all, it is the handmaid of thrift. It makes the most and the best of the bounties of God. It wastes nothing, but turns everything to account. Every Englishwoman, whether gentle or simple, ought to be accomplished in an art which confers so much comfort, health, and wealth upon the members of her household. "It appears to me," says Mrs. Margaretta Gray, "that with an increase of wealth unequally distributed, and a pressure of population, there has sprung up amongst us a spurious refinement that cramps the energy and circumscribes the usefulness of women in the upper class of society. A lady, to be such, must be a lady, and nothing else. Ladies dismissed from the dairy, the confectionery, the storeroom, the still-room, the poultry-yard, the kitchen-garden, and the orchard." She might have added the spinning-wheel. have hardly yet found for themselves a sphere equally useful and important in the pursuits of trade and art, to which to apply their too abundant leisure. When, at any time, has society presented, on the one hand, so large an array of respectably educated individuals embarrassed for want of a proper calling, and on the other, so ponderous a multitude of untrained, neglected poor who cannot, without help, rise out of their misery and degradation? What an obstruction to usefulness and all eminence of character is that of being too rich or too genteelly connected to work at anything! Many intelligent, high-minded ladies, who have felt disgusted at the idleness to which society condemns them, have of late years undertaken the work of visiting the poor and of nursing, a noble work. But there is another school of usefulness which stands open to them. Let them study the art of common cookery and diffuse the knowledge of it amongst the people. They will thus do an immense amount of good and bring down the blessings of many a half-hungered husband upon their benevolent heads. Women of the poorer classes require much help from those who are better educated or who have been placed in better circumstances than themselves. The greater number of them marry young, and suddenly enter upon a life for which they have not received the slightest preparation. They know nothing of cookery, of sewing, or clothes mending, or of economical ways of spending their husband's money. Hence slatternly and untidy habits and uncomfortable homes, from which the husband is often glad to seek refuge in the nearest public house. The following story, told by Joseph Corbett, a Birmingham operative, before a parliamentary committee, holds true of many working people in the manufacturing districts. "My mother," he said, "worked in a manufactory from a very early age. She was clever and industrious, and, moreover, she had the reputation of being virtuous. She was regarded as an excellent match for a working man. She was married early. She became the mother of 11 children. I am the eldest. To the best of her ability she performed the important duties of a wife and mother. But she was lamentably deficient in domestic knowledge, in that most important of all human instruction, how to make the home and the fireside to possess a charm for her husband and children. She had never received one single lesson. She had children apace. As she recovered from her lying in, so she went to work, the babe being brought to her at stated times to receive nourishment. As the family increased, so everything like comfort disappeared altogether. The power to make home cheerful and comfortable was never given to her. She knew not the value of cherishing in my father's mind a love of domestic objects. Not one moment's happiness did I ever see under my father's roof. All this dismal state of things I can distinctly trace to the entire and perfect absence of all training and instruction to my mother. He became intemperate, and his intemperance made her necessitous. She made many efforts to abstain from shop work, but her pecuniary necessities forced her back into the shop. The family was large, and every moment was required at home. I have known her, after the close of a hard day's work, sit up nearly all night for several nights together, washing and mending clothes. My father could have no comfort there. These domestic obligations, which in a well-regulated house, even in that of a working man, where there are prudence and good management, would be done so as not to annoy the husband, were to my father a sort of annoyance, and he, from an ignorant and mistaken notion, sought comfort in an alehouse. My mother's ignorance of household duties, my father's consequent irritability and intemperance, the frightful poverty, the constant quarrelling, the pernicious example to my brothers and sisters, the bad effect upon the future conduct of my brothers, one and all of us being forced out to work so young that our feeble earnings would produce only 1 shilling a week, cold and hunger, and the innumerable sufferings of my childhood crowd upon my mind and overpower me. They keep alive a deep anxiety for the emancipation of thousands of families in this great town, Birmingham, and neighborhood, who are in a similar state of horrible misery. My own experience tells me that the instruction of the females in the work of a house, in teaching them to produce cheerfulness and comfort at the fireside, would prevent a great amount of misery and crime. There would be fewer drunken husbands and disobedient children. As a working man, within my own observation, female education is disgracefully neglected. I attach more importance to it than to anything else, for woman imparts the first impressions to the young susceptible mind. She models the child from which is formed the future man. End of section 28.